right. Well, good afternoon. Thanks for the opportunity to present a little bit, talk to you about something that's it's a relatively new program that the Forest Service and emergency management's working together to get some agreements in place with ag pilots. And so one of the things that we did do a training with the ag pilots. Probably about a month ago, where they did some practice drops and stuff, and just as a point of clarification, in that picture kind of demonstrates it. When we talk about using ag pilots, they're not going to be using their spray bars, so they're not just going to fly along with a little mist coming out their wings. They actually use their emergency dumps on the belly of the plane, and it's so they'll drop a pretty large volume of water. Uh, and it seems to be pretty effective. So we'll kind of go through here and talk about some of the benefits. The reason that it's in this slide it says a seat program is because the pilots sit in a seat. I'm just kidding. It stands for single engine air tanker. Uh, so we one of the benefits is applying foam retardant early. One of the things that we'll talk about a little bit later on is the discussion on whether or not we're going to use foam or use retardant out of the planes. But they can uh, they can safely get to hot spots. Maybe there's areas of the fire where it's got a lot of timber in it, or maybe we can't get a truck to for some kind of safety reason. Uh, like in Barber County, where we had the real steep terrain, and maybe it'd be a decent place to use the aircraft for hitting hot spots that way. Um, Creating wet lines is another use for them. If we're doing backfiring operations or something, we can use them in creating a wet line, pre-treating the unburned side of the road, uh, to hopefully lessen the possibility of spot fires. We use them a lot for structure protection, which can get pretty challenging when we're intermixing wildfire with a whole lot of structures. Now, one of the things that when we were talking to the ag pilots about structure protection was, we don't want to encourage them to drop on homes. uh, there's a lot of weight coming out of those planes, and it's moving pretty fast. And so we really try to discourage dropping on somebody's house. So and they one of the things that they can do as well is provide kind of an eye in the sky, so that they can come in, make their drop, and as they're pulling away, you might be able to have a conversation with, hey, where's this fire at? Where's it going? What's it look like it's getting ready to get into, or out of, or whatever. They can kind of give you a general overview maybe of what they're seeing. Um, so so across the western United States, and lots of other parts of the country, they use retardant, and all it is just it's a gel mixture basically, and it just makes it stick to trees, uh, and it kind of makes it last a little longer. For the time being, in Kansas, we don't anticipate using any sort of retardant. We're primarily just going to use water. The reason that it's red in other parts of the country is because the next plane coming in can see where the first plane dropped, and it works pretty good if we're dropping right on the edge of the fire. Um, you may not need the red in it, but that's just the way the retardant the retardant comes. And the other thing with retardant is that it's going to up the cost of utilizing the aircraft, and we're still kind of weighing that back and forth on is the red color worth the cost of it. So with costs right now, the way things are sitting, is if you order an airplane, it's going to be a cost to the local jurisdiction, um, unless there's other arrangements or agreements that have been made. I know there's some fire departments around the state that have they already have agreements with their local ag pilots, and you know that if they choose to charge, then they do, and if they don't, then they don't. So, but there is going to be probably some cost associated with it. I know some of the fires that we've worked in the last couple of years. There's been some charges that has gotten picked up by the local jurisdictions, so the local fire department, local county, however that works. But um, so yeah, that's about all I was going to say about cost, and I probably should have put that at the end, and that way I could have been at the back of the room before I said that. But um, so some of the big questions that come up, uh, radios. How are we going to talk to them? You know, and communication is a critical element when we're dealing with air resources. And the way things are right now, um, well, I'll just use the example from the Highlands fire this past spring. We were able to talk on an air to ground channel to the National Guard Blackhawks, and then they were talking on an air to air channel with the ag pilot, and that was how that communication loop kind of got closed. It's not the most effective way to do it, and so we're working to try to establish the radio system. The ag pilots. It sounds kind of simple, like, well, why can't we just put radios in the airplanes? Well, apparently you have to go through a whole bunch of FAA stuff to make all that happen. And so then, but some of like our state 800 system and those kinds of things, the ag pilots um, don't have those kinds of radios like we have. So we're still working through some of the kinks with how that whole communication process is gonna work. I get asked a fair amount about foam, using foam for to drop out of the airplanes. The downside to foam is that it'll have too much drift, and it'll just kind of drift apart, especially on days where we're going to be using them. Is probably going to be high wind days, and so the drift is the big concern with using foam. The pilots are willing to put it in their planes and stuff like that, but I just don't think it would be all that effective. Um, so we're primarily going to just use water. The other thing that we need to identify, and this is where I think a lot of y'all can help us out, is with airports. Uh, if they have if you're by an airport, have an airport in your jurisdiction or whatever, but does it have a hydrant close? What kind of adapters is it going to take to hook in to fill up to refill the planes, and those kinds of things. So, but again, we're still trying to work on a lot of that stuff to get those things put on a map so that we can identify where they're at beforehand, and the goal is to hopefully have all that stuff done before we actually need it. But it takes a lot of time and a lot of work to make that happen. Um, and then of course, you know, the safety concerns with utilizing aircraft. Uh, you know, it's a different tool, and I don't want to give the impression that it's a fix all, and that, oh, we got 30 ag pilots across the state that are going to be dropping on fires, and so now we're just going to start catching all these fires and all this, because it's a tool, right? And um, it has its limitations just like everything else, and we'll get into that here in a little bit. But the safety message is, it's not a badge of honor to get dropped on by an airplane. Um, there's a lot of a lot of risk associated with it, and so one of the key parts of that is making sure that as planes are coming in, or helicopters for that matter, that we're getting out of the way so that they can do their drop, and then we can go back in to do our firefighting. The other piece to that is it's pilot's discretion. If they feel like it's too windy, or if they can't get down into the steep ravine, or whatever, in the training we did with them, I told them that it's their call. If they feel like it's too risky, then that's just, that's just the way it is, and we'll live with it, and we'll move on from there. So keep that in mind, because it's it definitely adds a lot of complexity to incidents when we start utilizing uh, aviation, and uh, especially if we're mixing parts, mixing ag aircraft with guard Blackhawks. Just there's a lot of complexities with that. So some of the big uses uh, for them is they can be a big help when we're going direct. When we're fighting fire like we do most of the time, we're the one thing I don't like about this particular picture is just they're in the unburned, right? But when we're in the burn, fighting fire along the black edge, they can really help knock down maybe the head fire, or knock down, just cool things off. Don't get the impression that they're gonna put it out, but it can really be a big help to us. Uh, I kind of have the same feeling about the whole badge of honor thing with getting dropped on by an airplane. I kind of have the same feeling about melted uh, headlights. So maybe you can use the airplane to cool it down. We can follow it up with our fire trucks and with our people, and take care of things. And like I kind of mentioned earlier, if we're going indirect, so if we're setting backfires, you might have a plane pre-treat, wet down the unburned side, just to help eliminate the potential for spotting. Uh, one of the challenges with using them for that, and this is something that has to really be communicated well when you're talking to a pilot, is if there are any aerial hazards, because they're going to be flying through some smoke, and so if there's power lines or anything like that, that's definitely got to be something that gets communicated very clearly to those pilots. Um, I know that they're used to flying low, pretty low from what I've seen. I would be nervous as flying that low, but whatever. So they asked me in that class. They asked me how low they needed to be to make their drops, and I was like, I don't know. I said 50 feet maybe, and one guy just kind of looks at me and says, 50 feet, because I was thinking having the wheels at like 20. So they're gonna get low, is the point, and there's some reasons for that. Is uh, they're worried about how much drift they're going to have, even dumping water. And what I told them was, I'm not going to tell you guys how to fly your plane, but one of the things that if you're going to miss to the unburned. It doesn't do a whole lot of good to drop 100 yards into the burn if you're going to miss. So just kind of anticipate that if we're utilizing them on fires, is that they're going to probably be right along the fire edge, and if they're going to miss or have any drift or anything like that, it'll go into the unburned side of the fire. Um, so that kind of gets us to the training side of things. This presentation is just kind of a general overview of utilizing ag aircraft, and we'd be more than happy to come do training to your fire department. And I think that it's a key element to the success of the utilization of these ag aircraft, is training on how to use them, how to communicate with them, what kind of things we're looking at, and then also it takes a lot of training on the pilot side. They're used to flying airplanes, they're used to flying low, and they're used to making drops, but they're not used to dropping it all at once. And so annually we're planning on doing training with the pilots, and it sounds like I don't know what just happened there, but It sounds like with the pilots, they're going to make it a requirement to at least do some drops every year at their annual ag pilot meeting or whatever. So there's going to be a lot of training that needs to occur and needs to take place. Um, the let's see if I can go back to. So that picture right there, the reason I put that in there is just because it's a cool picture. I don't ever expect to see that happen on a fire where they're flying like tandem and all of this. Um, and then some of their limitations that they will have is wind. I asked them what their wind speed would be that they would not feel comfortable flying in, and the answer was, well, we don't really care about how fast or how strong the wind's blowing. It's out of what direction. And what they were getting at was if they can take off or land into the wind, that's fine. They can go their wind speeds can be a lot higher when they fly, as opposed to a crosswind if they have to take off or land in a crosswind. And then one of them says, well, if that's the case, as long as we can get off the ground, we can just land on a road or something. You guys can fill us up, and then we keep going. I thought, oh, good luck. Um, but yeah, so there's a lot to it, and there's probably a lot more questions at this phase of the program than what we'll have answers for. But the Forest Service, Division of Emergency Management, and the ag pilots are working on the MOU to get this stuff in place, and how we're going to track them, how we're going to order them, and those kinds of things. I'm sure that there's a lot of questions out there that quite frankly we just don't have the answers to right now, but we are working on that whole process.